Yes, I asked for a review by FIFA.
What is the controversy over Team USA's Folarin Balogun? Tell us about the role of politics in sport today.
I think the referee's call was horrible. And nobody talks about that. They talk about the red card like it's fine.
Team USA may have been dumped out of the World Cup by Belgium, but the questions keep coming after the US star player was reinstated to the team after a phone call from Donald Trump to the president of FIFA.
I did. I spoke to Gianni, who's highly respected, who's produced the most successful World Cup in history by, they say, 4 times.
Take it back to Monday morning in the Oval Office, and the President of the United States is holding court on football.
I understand sports really well. And that wasn't a foul.
Even while admitting he didn't understand the rules or the referee's role.
I didn't know what the hell a red card was. When I found out, I said, you got to be kidding.
FIFA President Gianni Infantino said in a statement that the decision to reinstate Balogun was made by an independent committee not linked to Trump's phone call. The European governing body UEFA have described the decision as incomprehensible. But fans want to know, since when did heads of state have a say in the football side of the World Cup? From the BBC, I'm Tristan Redman in London, and this is The Global Story on YouTube. To make sense of all this, we wanted to understand how FIFA, the organization, has changed under the presidency of Gianni Infantino, and how in turn that's changing the sport that's followed by billions. So we spoke with the New Yorker magazine's Sam Knight, who's written a fascinating profile of Infantino.
Any sort of conversation about Infantino sort of has to look at him and FIFA, the FIFA that he took over in 2016, 10 years ago. But you sort of have to remember that the organisation that he took over was literally a byword for corruption. Do you know what I mean? It was pretty much a synonym for a rotten, sort of foul organisation that had sort of somehow ended up in charge of the world's most popular sport. So,
and there were convictions within the organisation, right?
This is, we got, people wearing wires for the FBI. And, I think it's about 40 people were indicted and most of them were found guilty. Lots of people went to prison. So this was a criminally out of control organisation that would kind of, when in the months before Infantino took over, could credibly have been shut down. It could have been shut down and prosecuted itself as it was considered for a moment to prosecute it under US racketeering charges, which are sort of what's used to sort of take down sort of organised crime and so on. So we have to acknowledge that FIFA, since he took over, is a much more professional, a much more functional, a much bigger organisation. It's about twice the size as the one that Infantino took over. It's much more profitable. It's a behemoth. It's extremely successful. And I think the thing that you have to observe alongside that is that it's him that's done it.
What's Infantino done to boost FIFA's income?
I would say there's sort of two sort of complementary sides to Infantino. He's a lawyer. Before he ran FIFA, he ran the legal department at UEFA and became the general secretary there. During his and Michel Platini's leadership at UEFA, incomes tripled. He is a very astute deal maker, always looking to sort of boost the bottom line. So every tournament, they're upping the sponsorships, they're charging more for tickets, they're seeking more kind of commercial sponsorship, they're kind of developing the women's game, they're taking the game out of its traditional heartlands in kind of Europe or Latin America and spreading it around the world and chasing new audiences. He is someone who kind of sees a kind of limitless financial possibility for football, and he will relentlessly pursue that. So it's anything from suggesting that you have a World Cup every 2 years, expanding the number of teams that can take part from 32 to 48 for the first time in this tournament, taking the competition pretty brazenly to countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia that can afford them and sort of maximize kind of income for the organization. The one that probably everyone's familiar with from this World Cup is the ticket pricing. And for the first time at this World Cup, the tickets are prices of $30,000 for the World Cup final, or sort of 10, 20 times the prices that they were at the last edition. The other thing that's very noticeable about Infantino's FIFA is that it is a cult of personality. This is an organisation which really exists in human form, in one guy's Instagram account, more or less. Like, if you want to know what's going on at FIFA, just follow Gianni Infantino on Instagram. He presents the trophies. He stands on the stage. You know, in the past, FIFA presidents didn't do this. They were more kind of backroom characters. Even though they were internationally known, they would not hog the limelight and want it to be about them in the way that FIFA is now. I remember just before the World Cup, they announced the 80 sort of referees and referees assistants who'd be working at the tournament. You think, how would you illustrate a picture of a press announcement of 80 referees at the upcoming? It's an enormous picture of Gianni Infantino. Of course it is. I mean, there's just an obsessional sort of desire to be at the centre of attention, and I think that he has, to some extent, mistaken football with himself. You know, he sort of sees himself as personally embodying this game, which actually we all love.
In the profile that you've written of Infantino, one of the things that really struck me, Sam, was the way you describe the governance at the top of the organization, and that it's now largely revolves around a lot of close personal contact between Infantino and heads of state, presidents and prime ministers. But how do those relationships with heads of state materially affect the sport and the way that a competition like the World Cup is actually run?
So, you know, again, you have to sort of compare and contrast to a certain extent. You know, the World Cup is the world's biggest sporting event. Countries have always been desperate to host it because they love it and political prestige, and maybe they're going to make some money and it'll be good for the economy. You know, it's one of those global prizes, and sort of has been for decades and decades. I think the thing that's changed is that if you imagine the head of the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, of course is going to be in town during the Paris Olympics and meeting the president of France and so on. But it's not a transactional deal between those two people. I think what's really changed under Infantino is this sense that that's where the power lies, and that's where the deals get done and the hand gets shaken, and then that's where stuff happens. I think before, maybe it was a performance, but I think it was actually true that the rest of the FIFA architecture, it's got a Congress, it's got delegates, it's got committees, it's got, you know, confederation heads gathering in hotels to sort of debate things, and, you know, in the past, accept bribes and so on, in order to reach conclusions. Now you have a real sense that the way that power functions at FIFA is between Infantino and kind of external political actors, and that's where the action happens.
So it's all concentrated, it would appear, in the hands of one man at the top of the organization. Is that right?
Yeah, and a very small team around him, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And how does that then materially play into the situation that we have now, where have we bypassed the ruling bodies of football that would have previously had a say in this kind of decision-making over things like red cards and suspensions in a World Cup?
In the months leading up to this World Cup, you'd sort of look at the elements of the cocktail in terms of Trump, in terms of Infantino, in terms of the climate, in terms of doing this across 3 nations, a huge geographical area, straight after the end of the European season. You know, everyone was expecting something, I'm not going to say to go wrong, but they were sort of saying you can't possibly have all these kind of elements together and just expect nothing to happen. And yet, I don't know if this is going to be the thing, but it's certainly a thing that no one saw coming, that would be the star player for the USA, the golden hope of football administrators everywhere, is that the US would finally become wonderful at international soccer, and the sport would be taken to the heart of America, and think of the entertainment and the billions that would be made there. The star striker for the USA team, the men's USA team, that's finally got its act together and seems like it's really good and could go really deep into this World Cup and be an actual genuine sporting contender, is going to miss their next match. And guess what? Trump doesn't like it, Infantino doesn't like it, and the problem melts away.
So effectively, it's an incentive for FIFA to keep to help keep the United States in the competition, because having continued US interest in the World Cup is important? Is that what you're saying?
They know how this looks, is what I'm saying. They know it's not like this would be an unpredictable reaction that everyone would call into question the integrity of the tournament, and is Trump calling Infantino, and kind of what does this mean about it? They know that we will be having this conversation, and so I think that's where you have to look at it as an expression of power, and almost daring people to object.
Donald Trump has confirmed that he called Gianni Infantino to ask him to review the, quote, horrible call from the referee on Balogun's red card. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, in a sense, it accords with everything that we know about the ongoing sort of relationship between Trump and Infantino. They're warm, they're close, they clearly kind of see that they can sort of do a lot for each other. On the one hand, it's totally natural that they would be sort of chatting regularly during the World Cup, so sort of nothing to see here in that respect. But, you know, Trump, as he always does, just sort of says the unsayable. I mean, it's just unthinkable in any previous World Cup that you could have the head of state of a host nation calling the head of FIFA sort of to try and let one of his guys off the hook. We'll never know the sort of the granular detail of it. But Infantino runs FIFA from all of my sort of reporting would suggest in an extremely kind of micromanaged way. This is someone who's sort of involved in every detail of sort of, you know, parking for disabled fans or kind of transit to the stadium in Dallas. Everything's going across Infantino's desk. I think, you know, it's just sort of from my reporting among kind of people who work at FIFA, people who work closely with FIFA, people who've sort of left the organisation. This is a sort of an ongoing sort of repeated observation of the sort of the level of detail that he's involved in.
What does this mean for future World Cups, Sam, in terms of the precedent that it might set? And I should say that the Royal Belgian Football Association has now released a statement in which it said, regardless of the sporting outcome of this match, the RBFA, the federation, is deeply concerned by the course of events and will continue to fight in the coming hours, days and months in defense of the fundamental principles of ethics, fair competition and interests of football as a whole. I mean, this is really blowing up at this point, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's going to be intriguing to watch how this plays out, because it just really isn't supposed to happen, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Sport is where we escape from daily life and kind of enjoy it, but it's also a place of rules. You know, sports are made by rules and processes and referees, and we defer to those authorities. And when it turns out that you can pick up a phone and alter those rules to sort of to suit what you want to happen, it strikes people very deeply to say that this won't stand. And it'll be interesting to see in this World Cup. We're all talking about it. Everyone's outraged by it. But does anything actually follow from that? Does anyone speak up for the integrity of football? Or does everyone sort of throw their hands up in the air and say that this is sort of slightly ghastly, but then carry on?
If we zoom out a little bit and look at kind of global sport a bit more widely, I just wonder what you think of the idea that there might be an inherent flaw in sports governance. You know, whether it's FIFA with the World Cup or the International Olympic Committee with the Olympic Games, both of these organizations have a monopoly essentially on an enormous event. It's not like there's going to be a kind of competitor to the Olympic Games that just sort of springs up out of nowhere. And when there's no competition, the pressures on an organization to reform and change are limited. Is that just an inescapable reality of major global sporting events?
I mean, governance sort of scholars and people at business schools sort of study this stuff up and down, particularly kind of sports governance organizations, and say, are they inherently corrupt? Are they inherently problematic? Are they kind of unreformable? I think that FIFA does have a profound sort of tension at the heart of it, which is it is there to sort of regulate football and run competitions and sort of set good standards for the world's most popular sport, while at the same time it's a commercial organisation trying to maximise revenue at all terms and at all times. And I think that those two goals are fundamentally in conflict with each other. You can sort of try and design an organisation or a kind of mechanism to sort of acknowledge those two forces sort of pulling in the same direction. I also think that the political will to really challenge FIFA or really challenge the International Olympic Committee, if you sort of think of kind of world leaders and politicians and sort of what's on their desk at any given moment, they're like, am I gonna really put my back out here to sort of be the man or the woman who sort of can't stand FIFA and is going to bang on about it all the time? So who's really going to spend their sort of political capital to take on one of these organisations and reform it, and then find 5-10 years down the road it's in a sort of slightly similar state, or even worse than it was when you started tampering with it?
Yeah, totally. The Olympics and the World Cup are supposed to be fun, and nobody wants to be Mr. or Mrs. Boring who comes along and
Exactly.
makes them less fun. Well, thank you so much, Sam. It's been really great to talk this through with you, and I'm wishing you the very best of luck on your very arduous and hard deployment to New York City for the final of the World Cup to report on it. Good luck with that.
Thank you. I'll try and get through it as best I can.
That was Sam Knight of The New Yorker magazine. And that's it for this episode. The Global Story is also an audio podcast. We're available every weekday wherever you listen. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow. Cheerio.